We were talking about Mayfair Park, which is a model community in the 1950s. And what happens is, again, when the GIs came home, after the war, and they wanted to be educated, they wanted to do things that wouldn't have been available to them. They also wanted to own property. They wanted to have a house and raise their families. And again, what the government did for the veterans was the Veterans Administration had very low-price loans. VA loans for veterans were about 2%. These houses in the late 1940s, early 50s were selling for about $8,000, $9,000.
My husband had some friends, I guess, that lived over here, but we did like the location. It was nice. It was new, and it was we were near stores and school and nice people that lived here that we knew. So when my husband says this is it, that was it. And I wouldn't live anywhere else.
We moved directly into Mayfair Park. They had, I guess, been in the city enough that my father, who was always interested in growing things and horticulture and things like that, wanted space for a garden. And to live inside Burlington, you didn't have that option, and he wanted that option.
Mayfair Park I didn't appreciate this when I first was there as a child, of course, but it was really one of the first suburban developments, actually in Vermont, but certainly in South Burlington, and one of the first suburban developments in Chittenden County, if you can believe that. I mean, when we look around now, we say, oh, this is nothing but one neighborhood after another, and it must have sort of always been that way. But that's really not the case.
Well, we picked a lot and built a house.
Yeah, I had no idea what the houses were going to be like or anything.
Next door to you or anything.
I do know she has said my father picked this lot because it was opposite a street. He didn't want to be looking directly into a house.
I had quite a few friends that I'd known from college in Burlington who had married doctors. So fortunately, they would come out to see me. They always brought food because they felt sorry for me without a telephone. And I had a freezer, so they'd bring, bread and stuff that could put in there. And it was nice, but the only thing was you never knew when anybody was coming because there wasn't any telephone.
In 1938, they started building some houses in Mayfair Park. And then as World War II came on and a lot of the workers were going into the service and were out there to build houses, and money was tightening up and supplies were going toward the war effort instead of building, they put that project on hold. And there was a man by the name of Mr. Elsom, who I guess was the developer or owned the land. But he was an early entrepreneur who saw a good thing. Nice, great big flat area out there where he could build a lot of houses at relatively minimal expense.
And at that time, there were no subdivisions. There were either farms or the city. And so Mr. Eldred, I think Elsom was the farmer who was just beginning to break up his farm into house lots. And somehow they knew about it and contacted him and purchased one of the first lots in his subdivision.
Did he
He
live?
was a gentleman. If you want to see a gentleman, he was a gentleman, and you didn't have any. If he said he was going to do something, he did it, and for the price he said he was going to do it for, and you don't find very many people like that anymore, I don't think.
You see, the man, Mr. Olson, who wanted to, he had great visions for South Burlington, but he was a very poor man, but he just wanted to have it like England, and we always wondered why, but I found out he'd never been to England or anything, but he had read about England, and he would like to have a lot of it. And he died a pauper, which was too bad because he owned all of this. It was just a meadow. And one of the people didn't pay for their land, so he died a pauper. And he had that idea, that he really wanted. That's why the names are English. St. Victoria, Elsa Parkway, Circle Drive. That Circle Drive was supposed to be Churchill Drive. And Mayfair Park and Woodbine, they're all English names. I was asked to sort of write about the start of this, and I found that he had a son that lived in Massachusetts who had a grocery store. So I wrote to him, and I got a very pithy letter back that he didn't want anything to do with anybody from Mayfair Park because look at what they did to his father. That was it. And he wouldn't give out any information. It's too bad, in a way, because we could have at least, we don't even know. I think he was buried, I found out from somebody, he was buried in Jericho. And I went up and went all over the cemetery, but the trouble was that the man who was in charge of the cemetery got mad at the selectmen and destroyed all the records of the graves. So, couldn't find out.
But he used good material, I'll say that for him. Some more recent housing has not been that high quality, but the houses in Mayfair Park mostly have hardwood floors and really good construction and tight basements. And the house where I grew up is now, let's see, 1948, it's over 60 years old, and we don't have a leaky basement or any major problems. So he used good materials. Anyway, so the project stopped during World War II and then resumed after the war, like 1946 to 55 was probably the biggest boom for building there. And the house where I grew up, I think, was built in 1948. We bought it from the first owner.
In the covenant, it said that you couldn't play the radio, mow your lawn, or anything else on Sunday. And you had to sign that. That went before you moved here. And also you could only have one car, and you couldn't engage in any nefarious, I like that word, nefarious business. Whatever it might be. Nobody knew what it was. And that went on for a long while. And also, only the white race could live here. It took years before that could be changed.
So who set up the covenant to begin with? Where did it come from to start?
It came from the selectmen. No, it didn't either. It came originally from Mr. Elson, but it was in a kind of a rough shape, not really very, well, it wasn't very legal. And then he took it to Mr. Tilley, who was the town clerk here for 3,000 years, more or less, and he changed it around a little, and then they put it. I was reading over the covenant. It's kind of odd, and it did take years to change it.